Hi everyone, welcome to this week's pack. Today, as every week, I am joined here by me, Dominic, you, John, and you,
Matt.
Wow, that was the enthusiasm.
The dynamic Matt. I'm here.
Today, guys, we've got a great episode for you. We're going to be talking about design doing. So you may have heard of design thinking, and that is a big part of it, but we're more about the doing here at PAC. Yeah. And we're going to talk all about that today. So let's get started.
Let's go.
Right. So, Dominic, you and me talk about thinking versus doing quite a bit. How would you describe design thinking?
Define it, Dominic.
Oh my God. There is some pressure, I feel, upon me. There's the bigger picture stuff and then there's the doing stuff. And the doing stuff is obviously about the teams coming together collaboratively to sort of prototype stuff. And to do that, there's like a 5-step process, which is sort of like the empathize phase. Then there's the define phase. And then you move into ideation, prototype, and then test with real users. So for me, that is my sort of interpretation and summary of what design thinking is, with a little bit of doing. Do you know what I mean?
Cool. It's good. So it's a mindset, isn't it? Design thinking's a mindset with tools that you can use, and like you say, a bunch of things.
So many things you can chuck in there.
So many things.
So yeah, I guess I'm a bit of an extremist in regards to this. I've worked on a lot of projects over the years and seen lots and lots of thinking sabotage things getting released or causing fear of failure and stuff taking a long time. So we have lots of discussions around this. And today I think what we'd love to do is involve all of you in that discussion as well. So we're going to talk all around it and in the end probably get to the bit where I'm right.
Oh, nice. So sure of himself.
I like it. Confidence. Confidence to push forward.
I think, just on that, I guess for me, and I'm very passionate about this, I think it's very easy to feel comfortable creating artifacts and doing lots of thinking around something and strategizing and trying to define exactly who your audience are and build amazing personas. And, you can spend months and months doing this type of stuff. And at the end of it, you have lots of artifacts. And a lot of the times, these artifacts end up lost on a big company's servers, never to see the light of day again.
Yeah.
So we definitely wanted to kind of go through some of this. And I kind of found a quote which I really like. And it's by a guy called Malcolm Gladwell. And he's written a number of books like Outliers and things like that. But the book I wanted to talk a little bit or pull this quote out of is called Blink. And I'm just going to throw this quote out there to get us kind of kicked off. But he says in this book, we believe that we're always better off gathering as much information as possible and spending as much time as possible in deliberation. The first task of Blink is to convince you of a simple fact. Decisions made very quickly can be every bit as good as decisions made cautiously and deliberately. And that's by Malcolm Gladwell from his book.
That was beautifully eloquent.
It was.
Thank you.
And that is actually a very good book as well, I have to say. I read it over the weekend.
Of course,
in preparation, just in case the topic came up.
It's interesting though that what you say about ideas that are created quickly often are the ones when you try and come up with an idea for something, and usually the first one that you go for is the one that you circle back to. Yeah. But you don't trust that it's a good idea because you came up with it quickly. There's some kind of, it's almost like you need to validate it.
Well, a word he says in there is the power of our adaptive unconscious, which I think was just like really struck a chord with me because I was like, wow, that really does kind of make sense. I think I think if you have enough experience and stuff like that, you can rely often on your own unconscious thoughts because ultimately, and it's that whole gut feeling thing. It's like sometimes you instinctively know it might be right or wrong, but then if you're in a group mentality, it's often easier to just go along with what everyone else thinks, or perhaps, you end up in this long cycle of perhaps endless research and all of this stuff unnecessarily when ultimately, you weren't necessarily wrong with that initial thought that you had.
Yeah. And it's a comfort thing as well, isn't it? It's, let's try and get as much information gathered together, to give yourself the best possible chance of not failing when you're working on something, so if I have X amount of PDF documents that tell me all this stuff, before I've even started to create something, I've got a better chance of creating something that's not going to fail, basically. So there's definitely a fear of failure.
I think especially in if you're working on projects like some of the ones that we've worked on in big companies, in the corporate world, failure is not something you're rewarded for. Necessarily, especially in traditional buildings, and also people's egos come into play as well. And I don't say that just for people in the kind of client side companies. I think it's very much inside consultancies and designers and all the type of people that come in and help. Is that people want to be seen to be right and seen to be knowledgeable, and I think sometimes there's a comfort in going over and over and over doing something as opposed to doing it and seeing if it works or not, failing quickly, or at the same. But the reality is, I kind of failure is almost not the right word to use, because really it's kind of a success. Because if you can quickly identify what doesn't work, that's almost as good as quickly identifying what does work. Because you can you can basically completely not have to worry about that anymore, and definitely not spend 6 months building it like I've seen happen before, which can be even more frustrating.
6 months, 6 years.
The longest one I've done, I think there's an interesting project I did with TV channel, and it was for a set-top box platform, and it was naturally one of those projects which it was actually Channel 4 UView, and it was one of those projects which is going to take a long time because the technology has been developed in the background. So the set-top box was still being developed and rolled out.
It's all new.
The platform was being built, all that type of stuff. Now, obviously, in the meantime, from a design side, we're designing the user experience and the interface for working on the set-top box. And a couple of really good concepts have come out, and everyone's agreed and said, this is the way we should go. But then all that time in between actually being able to see anything live or move forwards, there's this inbuilt hesitancy in people to then stick with that. So people will question it, and they'll be looking at it and they might be bored of it. And obviously when you're talking about a design team of maybe 6 or 7 and then plus development team in the background, that becomes very, very expensive very, very quickly. So I guess that's the big thing, really, isn't it? It's that fear. It's that fear of doing the wrong thing. I think we even get that at the moment, setting this business up. I mean, we're guilty of overthinking stuff sometimes, aren't we? With content and, all the different types of things we do.
Yeah, it's natural. And I think the main thing is that you've just got to, you've got to have a cut off, and you've got to say, okay, yes, it's important to do that thinking time. It's important to have that validation and that backup, but there's got to be a line. You can't keep doing it forever, even if you're in that, some might say, lucky position where you can just keep working on that. Let's just do a bit more of this research and a bit more of that research, because I really feel if we just knew that and if we just did that, we'd be good to go, and we'd know that this is a surefire winner. There's no such thing as a surefire winner. Sometimes you've just got to pump the brakes on the thinking and just roll your sleeves up. Do it.
Get involved.
Get to the chopper.
Too much design thinking can lead to too much of a structured approach, and that's not what really it's about. And there's a great line that I read earlier, and someone had said, "Design thinking, like jazz, which I love, requires an appreciation for improvisation. Learning how to apply it is an experiential and social activity." So for me, it really, I was just like, wow, that really resonated with me, because it is an experience, and it's something that is about improvisation. You can't, there is no right way, but it's about coming together and learning, and a bit like if you try and ride a bike, it's an experiential thing. You could read a book about how to learn a bike, but ultimately you're never going to be able to learn how to ride it unless you give it a go.
Think of the Karate Kid, right? Daniel's son. He's in his apartment. He's just moved to town. He's learning karate out of a book. Is he ever going to be the champion? No.
Exactly.
He needs to get down the dojo, find a sensei, and do it properly.
Did I just hear you say dojo?
Dojo.
That reminds me of sourdough.
Oh.
It's taken me a fair few episodes to sneak in here. But actually...
Mad sourdough hour.
This is it. Baking time. No, but this I'm hoping is a genuine reason for getting sourdough into this. I don't know.
So.
Obviously, we filmed this episode just after the whole lockdown of these, and I know a lot of people got into various different things while they were locked in their houses. Before the lockdown started, I got into making sourdough, which I've been making now probably for about a year.
You kept it up then?
Yeah, I still have. I made 2 loaves yesterday.
Nice.
When are you going to bring some of this in?
Would you like some sourdough?
I'd love a sourdough tasting session.
I'll make some special gluten-free. It takes a week to get the start. Anyway, I digress.
If you would like to know more
digress.
about sourdough, please.
Sourbros.com. You can go down there. Anyway, but yeah, no. So sourdough is like one of those points, right? So when I started doing that, you've got a choice. You can either read all the books on how sourdough works, but you can look at sourdough is a non-exact science as well, right? Because there's so many things that make a difference, like your starter, the temperature, the type of flour you use, the amounts of flour you use, all that type of stuff. Fundamentally, you're going to end up with a sourdough loaf in some form.
Yeah.
It's not until you start making it, you realise how bad at sourdough you are making it when you've never made it before. The first one I did, I'll put a link to a post actually where you can see my first sourdough loaf, which at the time, not knowing what a sourdough should look like, and in my head wanting this to be the best one, the most terrible sourdough. No, I'm not even going to call it a loaf. Felt very good, but funnily enough, it's one of those things that you need to get a tactile feel for. You can't know how to use like this wet dough unless you like move it around with your hands. You feel what the texture of it's supposed to be like, and you try it at different temperatures in the oven, and you try all these different things. The good thing about it is the first loaf I made, I ate. It was fine. It could get incrementally better, which it has done. And it looks much more like an artisan sourdough loaf. Yeah. But I couldn't have progressed that by just thinking about it. I needed to roll up my sleeves, get my apron on, and get some loaves in the oven.
There's no amount of sourdough Instagrams you could have looked at. Pictures of beautiful loaves. You needed to go on your own journey.
But that's what we do with products, right? So what we do with products, we're like, oh, okay, so I'm going to make an app for something. Right. Let's 100% nail my non-existent audience that I don't even have yet and try and define an exact persona for it. And don't get me wrong, a persona to a degree I believe is a good thing. Knowing who your audience is a good thing.
You need a foundation.
You can go away and you can think about this stuff for ages and ages and ages. And I think sometimes you can back yourself into a corner and be too scared to, show somebody that first version of the app because you're worried it's not the perfect thing. Where actually, if you really understand the purpose of what you're doing, and you understand what you're trying to achieve, getting out there and trying it in any kind of way, be it a prototype stage, be it a kind of an MVP stage, be it a first release stage, is going to be way, 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 way better at learning. Many, it's like many again. Many. A way, way better way.
It's still going. It's still in the ways.
No, it'll be
many ways?
It'll be all the ways. It would be a much better way for you to get quick feedback, to make decisions then based on what the people that are fundamentally going to get the benefit of using your Apple service are, and being able to, work off real data. And that's why I think I always have a little bit of a fluff about I'm pretty, I can be pretty harsh and just be like, design thinking can just basically beep off. And John told me not to swear. And actually just need to get in and do it. Luckily, I don't work in isolation, and I'm questioned on a daily basis by Dominic.
Yes.
Much keener on lots of thinking than I am, but that's probably because he's much more intelligent anyway.
It's something to do with that. I mean, when John and I, whenever we go and talk to people about design thinking, I'm 100% behind getting them involved in some sort of a practical activity that helps explain it in a fun and engaging way. For me as well, I do feel like we are aligned on this. It's not too much design thinking and just standing there and talking there is not going to have the same impact as actually getting people involved and giving them something to do.
Yeah. It's incredible the amount of people we come across, and we touched on this before about the purpose thing, the amount of businesses, startups, big businesses, companies, whatever, that get to a certain point where they haven't sorted their purpose out. And it's the same a lot of the time with products and thinking, how much either they've done too much and they've lost sight of the fact that they've actually got something to try and make, or they haven't done enough, So there's a happy medium in the middle where you've got your foundation, you've got enough to go on, and then you can start doing your sourdough feels, basically. Kneading the dough, feeling the texture, baking the bread, popping a slice out here and there and seeing who's into it and how you can make it better, right? So,
and this sounds, it's not a super complicated thing to do as well, in terms of like the doings part of it. It's so much fun and actually there's so much value there that, there's more people should be doing it. And it's a social thing. It's about learning from the people that you're with in the room and growing together to kind of create something that, ultimately is so much.
I'm glad you brought that up, actually. This is my second quote of the day. Quote of the day.
Quote of the
day. Because I've realised that there are many smarter people than me in the world. I finally accepted it. I have finally accepted it. But there's this guy called Ed Catmull that basically set up Pixar. He didn't only set up Pixar as well, actually. He actually invented like Z buffering, like in 3D modelling. I mean, that's how tied in the guy.
I'm not even sure what that is, but it sounds
we'll pretend we know
it is. Put the data sound in for that one. Anyway, basically, he talks about in his book getting people to show their creative work every day and how painful it is for them at first, but how critical it is to the creative process. He says it's more effort to show the work early and it's not comfortable to show something before it's complete. But the benefit is that when you're done with the work, you're done. You already showed it to other people and you already incorporated their feedback. No big reveal, no surprises, and no anxiety at the end. And I think that's so strong, and it kind of plays into that fear. I think everyone sometimes is scared to hand over stuff or show what they're working on because then they have to go away and do feedback. But actually, if you can just get that out, incorporate some feedback, put it back in, constantly talk to each other and try, and that's what you should be doing with your your products and when you're looking at services and not just apps and stuff like that. It's everything.
And I think it goes both ways as well, doesn't it? With the in that context that you're talking about with Pixar, it's like everyone shows their creative work, but also sharing some of that thinking with the team as well, and just not
by doing.
Exactly. Like, this is what we found out, and this is what we've done. We've kind of validated it like this, or whatever it is. We've started to think about how this could look, and it's not a dirty thing to start pushing some pixels around. As long as you've done enough to validate that you've got something to start working on. I know when me and Dominic started as designers, there was zero design thinking. Certainly in the kind of places that we worked, and as a designer there was that kind of trust that, well, as a designer what people want, and then there was, okay, we're going to start wireframing stuff, but it's very much, okay, the wireframe is just for the client or internally, and very rarely did they get to the point where you'd be putting concepts in front of users and stuff like that and validating and getting that data. And it's a relatively new mainstream trend to be putting this much time and effort into the thinking before stuff gets done. In the past, it was very much about, okay, this is the project, this is the product, we're making something, kind of get going and start making it, and then we'll see. And I'm not saying that's the right way to do it, but there's definitely a happy medium.
I'd say it's closer to that way than it is too much thinking. But,
I think I'm not exactly sure the ratio.
I think there's a middle ground, isn't there?
Yeah.
I think between doing too
no
much.
Extreme, no thinking.
98%
between doing too much and doing too little. But I think that becomes quite obvious usually.
I don't know. I think there's sometimes it's just there can be so much thinking. Like, it's so easy to have that comfort blanket of, we talked about it earlier. Someone said something earlier about having lots of documents to reinforce that you're doing the right thing, and I think sometimes that can change into not just reinforcing the right thing, but actually covering us. And it's like, if I have all this stuff, if it doesn't work out, then we've done all the thinking, it just hasn't worked out. Whereas really, you could have validated that by trying some of it. And I know not every situation works the same. And I know sometimes you have to think, and some companies, do it differently.
The thing is with design, though, for me, it's such a powerful thing. I mean, Tim Brown said it really well in Change by Design, is that design is no longer just for designers, it's for everybody. And I think that was, again, like a really impactful thing for me when I read that, because I was like, wow, this is so true. Like, design in general is so much bigger than, it's not just about design anymore. It's about the bigger picture and what design thinking does, and what we're trying to do as, is as design doers is really try and, implement that message and say that actually you don't have to be a designer to get involved in this sort of thing. To be able to do it, don't be afraid by the word design, because actually it's
co-design, isn't it? It's co-design, it's co-accountability, and it's making sure design's not just about the pretty stuff, but it's about what goes into it. How do you make the experience? How do you gather the information from the wider team, people that you would never think would have an input on the design of something, but actually they got knowledge bombs inside of them.
That is a seriously good point, actually.
Knowledge bombs.
I think that's for it is design thinking in itself, isolated. It's a very lonely sort of place.
It's a lonely beast.
Whereas I think some of these taking the ingredients from design thinking and then pulling it into these design doing exercises, like you say, it opens that up to the rest of the company. So you might have somebody in finance that, probably would be scared if you said, right, I'm going to get you to prototype something or think about it. But actually you're enabling them to bring in the really impactful stuff that they can bring and the perspective that they have from an organisation to add real value. And fundamentally, the design doing is just a facilitation and a way to help these people express that stuff and get it out in a way that can be tested.
Yeah, because there's that thing, isn't there? That's a prime example of, someone who, they're like, oh, I can't draw, or I can't, and that is 100% not the point. It's like you're going to bring real value just being who you are, and it doesn't need to be in the form of a drawing. This whole process, it helps enable that. As long as you can draw a square or a circle or a triangle, you're going to be fine.
You don't even need to do that sometimes. I did a live wire for a training session in Switzerland where we literally were like, if you can't draw, just write. Just put the words of what you're doing.
Interpretive dance.
Well, this is it. Anything. We definitely do an interpretive dance workshop. Actually, it's one we lined up like
line dancing,
pouting with the pack, and it's going to be big. It's going to be the greatest workshop as
it's going to be the greatest of all time.
Would say.
Let's talk about then. Okay, so we're talking about design thinking, the thinking behind the designing, and the design doing. The doing of the designing, and we are just to be super clear,
right? We're tying it up. We're in the third act now. Is that
We're moving on. So let's move on to practical strategies for how you can make sure you're not doing too much thinking, but you're doing some thinking, and you're doing something tangible. And I think that's what it comes down to. It's about doing something tangible and actionable with the stuff that you're thinking about. So you're not just creating document after document to make yourself feel better and to make yourself feel like you're going to fail less, but you're going to come out with something that is something tangible, right?
Yeah.
Right. So let's talk about.
Yes.
It's 90% how you say it. It's 10% what you say. So I think frameworks, right? Yeah. Frameworks. Let's talk about frameworks because obviously we talked about empathy, we talked about ideation, we talked about prototyping, we talked about validation. So the design sprint is the ultimate design thinking playlist. So you're taking elements of design thinking. And you're driving towards that kind of experimentation and prototyping in a short space of time. So that is why the sprint is a powerful tool, right?
Yeah, definitely. I think it's one of the tools. It's one of the designs. It's
not the only tool.
It's the one that we favour a lot. But like obviously we've got loads of content out. There's a couple of links in the notes about how you can go find out more about that specifically. But I think it is like bringing people together in the thing I like about it the most is the constraints, and I think that's kind of what we've been getting at with some of the stuff that we're talking about, and what I think I really like with regards to sort of the design doing side of stuff. Design thinking's unlimited, right? You can go on, you can keep doing it. If you're doing something, you have a finite amount of energy and a finite amount of time, and those constraints actually equal creativity, right?
Yeah.
The most creative things, some might say, are born out of a need and a constraint, and having to really think about how you can get around the constraints to come up with a new solution, which tends to be something that's like 10 times change, and I guess you qualify that as innovative. And yeah, I think like design sprints are a great way to do that. I think sometimes, again, another topic of debate for me and Dominic, and one he has rightly helped me see the way on, is sometimes that you can come in with not all the information, and actually taking the time to do just the right amount of research is really important as well. So you understand.
Just right.
Just the right amount. That's all I'm going to go to on the record. Just the right amount.
Yeah, we won't bore people to death with that.
Exactly. There'll be a special episode filmed later in this week when John goes on holiday, especially to get away from this topic around just the right amount of research. But I think it's like what activities and workshops and things can you do to bring people together to get them actually making stuff and producing things that can be tested.
Yeah, and exactly. I think like John said, like the design sprint is definitely one way of doing that, but like there are so many other ways to do that, and I think certainly for a company perhaps who's not used to that way of working, because like we were saying, the Tim Brown quote about design is not just for designers, that is true, but then sometimes it's not as easy. It's easier said than done for the organisation to realise that, and it could be quite a daunting task to think that they could bring a team of people together to come and run a design sprint right off the off. So there are lots of definitely,
or just participate.
So there's lots of little things that we're working on always to try and help encourage teams to come together in a collaborative way and start off even smaller than that, just to kind of get people used to the kind of exercises and things within it.
Exactly. The beauty of it is, and I think some of the kind of risks seen internally sometimes around the sprints and frameworks like that make you do something quickly is that, well, how much value or how much worth can we possibly get out of something that only lasts a week or lasts a couple of weeks or whatever it is. But actually people can work a lot quicker than you give them credit for. They can make decisions faster. If you force them to stick to those choices and say, actually, we're not going to go around in circles. Like, we've got a good idea here. Let's roll with it and test it and move on. And that's the thing that frameworks like that help you do, is just let go. It's like, okay, you've got until the end of this day to come up with your problem or your solution or whatever it is, and then we're moving on and we're doing the next phase. And you can't go back and go, oh, actually, I think we should be looking at this or looking at that. You've got to roll with it and you've got to own it. And I think that's the thing. You got to have ownership over it. You've got to grab it. Yeah, stick to your guns, right?
It's like the diving board paradox, right?
Yeah.
You heard of the diving board paradox?
No.
Of course you haven't. I just made it up. It's like, do you remember when you were a kid and you used to go to the local swimming baths?
Oh, yeah.
And they'd have like those diving boards, and they'd be like the little mini one, and you just go and you'd be like, first time you're on it, like, oh, I'll have a little jump off it.
Yeah.
And then there was that platform, the platform that was like, almost they had to build an extension on the building up high.
Yeah, I know.
And from the bottom, as a small child, you're like, that looks pretty big. And anyway, you go up to this thing, you climb to the top and you walk to the edge, and you stand at the edge and you look down, and like you get that Hitchcock vertigo moment where, the ground just gets bigger and it goes out, and you kind of paralysed by it. You stop and you probably walk down the stairs a couple of times.
Yeah, but then there's a queue behind you.
Yeah, there's a queue, and you come back next week, you walk up the stairs,
you
walk down again. But then that time that you get up there and you jump off and your heart goes up into your throat and you hit the water, and you burst out of it and you go, that was awesome.
Straight back up.
And then you're straight back up and
you
you're
realise
doing
you've
it
lost
again.
your swimming trope.
That's it. And no one does like this. And no one
happened,
does the flip, and no one does like the thing the first time they jump off the diving board. But the longer they put off jumping off that diving board, the longer it's going to be until they can do all that other stuff. And I think that's what design doing is.
That moment you step off that diving board. Matt is just hot on the analogies today.
Just
sourdough diving board.
I need the Knowledge Bomb soundtrack.
Soundtrack
there. So it's got to be something.
We should definitely give you one.
Insert Knowledge Bomb soundtrack.
I need the Knowledge Bomb soundtrack. and you burst out of it and you go, that was awesome. Diving board paradox, right? Knowledge Bob soundtrack. That was awesome.
Yeah, I think you're right. You know, the moment you do it, the moment you say, I'm going to stop thinking about this, I'm going to do it, and that's a real like hard line, isn't it? With the diving board, once you're off it, we're not talking about Roadrunner where he runs off the edge of a cliff, right, and then he spins around and jumps back quickly. Gravity doesn't work that way, and it's the same with design doing. It's got a gravity to it, right? Once you start,
take the design out, just doing. And I think that for me is kind of it. It's just get out there, do it. You're going to learn by doing. It's scary, don't overthink it.
Yeah, don't be afraid to fail.
Don't be stupid. Have a look over the edge of the diving board first. Make sure there's some water in there. Make sure do the basics. But there's a level where you need to have a bit of faith that in fact if it's not the best thing the first time round, actually that gives you the power to learn and it gives you the enthusiasm, and that's what we do with design doing. We go into teams and we give them the enthusiasm to try stuff. Have a safe space to fail.
Exactly.
And absolutely change the game and revolutionise the stuff.
You just made me think we should start bringing in a diving board now to our workshops.
Even the worst ever belly flop will soften and go back to normal and de-red itself in time.
It, exactly.
Yeah. You'll get over it and you'll be back up that board, and the next time you'll be doing
stronger.
a pike.
That's it.
Yeah, and you're there stronger. So if you do fail, you come back stronger, and you learn and adapt.
So get your aprons on.
That's what makes us great as human beings.
Is it apron time?
Get your aprons on.
Or is it Speedo time?
Get your aprons.
I'm
Get
confused.
your Speedos and your aprons on.
Oh, I'm dodging.
Jump to the top of the diving board. Grab your sourdough and just jump in. Design.
Does it help you float?
Just.
I bet your first loaf you'd probably sink.
My loaf would take you to the bottom.
Take you to the bottom.
Yeah.
You'll be sleeping with the fishes.
Yeah.
So what we say in a nutshell, just get out there and start some doing. Literally, don't be afraid. Use these tools, use these design thinking tools to build your team together and give people the support and the strength to be able to fail, learn from it, get stuff out, and absolutely nail it.
Thank you everyone for joining us today on this episode of Pack Unleashed Design Doing. It's been a good one.
I really enjoyed it. It's one of these ones I get quite passionate about. I know you do, we all do. It's because we care. We just want to see.
Two things I miss: swimming
and
and sourdough. I think.
Yeah. I reckon if you took a waterproof pack with you, you could take your sourdough on a swim
for swimming.
That's perhaps what we are for people.
Little pooch of
a waterproof pack filled with sourdough.
Like a gagao. It's a company.
Yeah.
There you go. So if you want a swim-proof pooch of sourdough, do get in touch. But until next time,
tell us what you love. Tell us what you like. Give us some comments. Tell us how
please
crazy
like
we
and
are.
comment.
Feel free to say how good the diving board analogy is. If you reference that, please do link to us in any post.
For the sourdough analogy, press 1. For the swimming board analogy, press 2. We have been Pack Unleashed. It's been a pleasure. Thank you very much for listening. We will see you next time. See you guys.
See you next Tuesday.
See you next Tuesday.